Across the rural breadbasket of the United States, in the long century between the 1840s and the close of the 1960s, the slow and unbroken business of saving open-pollinated heritage seed corn from one autumn to the next remained one of the most patient, least photographed, and most genealogically meticulous undertakings carried on by the plain farming communities of southeastern Pennsylvania, central Ohio, northern Indiana, and the limestone valleys of the Shenandoah, with the work passed hand to hand from grandfather to grandson and grandmother to granddaughter, leaving no patent papers and no commercial brand names, only the saved seed ear in a hand-built oak crib and the pencil entry in a leather-bound ledger noting husking date, harvest row, ear length and road count, and the variety name as it had come down to the saver before. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where the limestone-derived loam of the southern Lancaster Valley, between the Susquehanna River and the Pequea Creek, had since the 18th century German Mennonite settlement of the valley supported one of the richest and most continuous corn cultivation traditions east of the Mississippi River, the open-pollinated heritage corn lineages had, over the course of 5 generations, come to define the rural agricultural identity of the county, and to anchor an entire web of subsidiary trades from the grist mill at Bird in Hand to the stock-feeding barns of the Strasburg Pike, and the saved seed corn of the Lancaster County German Mennonite and Old Order Amish farmsteads had since the 1850s been quietly understood as among the most reliable open-pollinated stock in the eastern United States. Between 1947 and 1969, however, the long-settled open-pollinated heritage corn economy of the southern Lancaster Valley underwent a swift and largely uncontested consolidation as the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative at Strasburg, founded in 1947 and operated by the Albrecht family, expanded its bulk procurement contracts across the southern Lancaster Valley and steadily converted the contracted farms from the inherited open-pollinated stocks to the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A, commercial F1 hybrid corn line, the most heavily marketed of the new Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrids bred at the Pioneer Hybrid International facility at Johnston, Iowa, with the consequence that by the close of the 1969 growing season, approximately 79% of all commercial corn acreage in Lancaster County had been brought under the Strasburg Cooperative's contracted hybrid procurement umbrella. In the autumn of 1970, the long-settled commercial hybrid corn order of the Lancaster County Limestone Valley met its reckoning when the Southern Corn Leaf Blight epidemic, a previously regional fungal pathology that had swept north from the Florida and Mississippi commercial cornfields over the spring and summer of 1970, reached the eastern Pennsylvania commercial corn corridor in the second week of August 1970, and within 7 weeks had stripped an aggregate 38% of the expected 1970 corn yield from the 84 hybrid corn contracted farms of the Strasburg Cooperative, a reckoning that fell almost exclusively upon the Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrids and almost entirely spared the open-pollinated heritage corn lineages that the plain farmsteads of District 6 had quietly continued to plant. The Lancaster County commercial corn industry between 1947 and 1969 followed a trajectory familiar to the agricultural historian of the post-war American grain economy. An initial period of cautious adoption of the new hybrid corn lines during the late 1940s and early 1950s, a middle period of accelerated displacement of the inherited open-pollinated varieties during the mid-1950s through the early 1960s, and a final period of near-total consolidation under the pioneer hybrid 3306A line during the middle to late 1960s. The Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative at 418 South Decatur Street, Strasburg, Pennsylvania, had been chartered on April 11, 1947, by a consortium of 14 southern Lancaster Valley commercial grain operators, under the founding directorship of Frederick Albrecht, father of the present general manager, Earl Albrecht, with the explicit purpose of consolidating regional commercial corn procurement and providing uniform bulk storage and uniform grade marketing services to the contracted member farms of the cooperative. By the close of the 1952 procurement season, the cooperative held bulk purchase contracts with 31 Lancaster County farms. By 1958, the figure had risen to 53 farms. By 1964 to 72 farms. And by 1969, it had reached its high water mark of 84 contracted farms, representing 79% of the commercial corn acreage of southern Lancaster County. The Pioneer Hybrid 3306A commercial F1 hybrid line, introduced to the eastern Pennsylvania commercial corn market in the spring of 1962 by the Pioneer Hybrid International Seed Corporation of Johnston, Iowa, was the dominant of the new Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid corn lines and was marketed to the Lancaster County Cooperative as the highest yielding and most labor-efficient commercial corn line then available, with the Texas male sterile cytoplasm specifically engineered to eliminate the labor-intensive hand detasseling step that had previously been required during the production of commercial F1 hybrid seed corn. By the close of the 1969 growing season, an estimated 85% of all commercial United States hybrid corn acreage was planted with Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid lines, the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A, foremost among them in the eastern Pennsylvania commercial corn corridor, and the entire 84-farm membership of the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative was at that time contracted to the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A line under a uniform bulk procurement schedule, paying the prevailing 1969 commercial corn price of $1.18 per bushel, with a yield bonus structure for production above 78 bushels per acre. Within the old order Amish farming community of District 6, however, the Cherry Hill Lane District lying 3 miles east of Bird in Hand on the level lowland between the Mill Creek and the Cherry Hill Creek, the inherited open-pollinated corn-saving method had been continued throughout the post-war consolidation without modification and without participation in the Strasburg Cooperative's bulk procurement schedule, with at least 14 District 6 farmsteads continuing to plant the 4 established Pennsylvania heritage open-pollinated corn varieties on dedicated grain plots ranging in size from 4 to 12 acres, and saving the autumn seed corn in the traditional manner of the German Mennonite settlement period. In the autumn of 1958, on an 80-acre rolling hillside 3 miles east of Bird in Hand, Pennsylvania, in the stone-walled 1898 corn granary 38 feet northeast of the white clapboard farmhouse, a 25-year-old Amish thresher named Daniel Stoltzfus and his wife Rebecca Stoltzfus, then 23 years of age, took inventory for the first time as the new owners of the Cherry Hill farmstead of 12 bushels of carefully husbanded, open-pollinated heritage seed corn that had been saved continuously by his late grandfather's brother, Henry Stoltzfus, from the autumn of 1898 forward, with the inventory comprising 4 distinct Pennsylvania heritage varieties stored separately in 12 hand-built cedar storage chests along the east wall of the granary. 3 bushels of Lancaster Sure-Crop, 2 bushels of Bloody Butcher, 3 bushels of Yellow Hickory King, and 4 bushels of the family-developed Stoltzfus Yellow Dent. The transfer of the Cherry Hill farmstead from Daniel's elderly father, Christian Stoltzfus, Jr., then 79 years of age, to Daniel and Rebecca had been concluded on the morning of September 14, 1958, at the Lancaster County Recorder of Deeds office in Lancaster City, and the transfer had included the 80-acre rolling hillside parcel, the white clapboard farmhouse, the bank barn, the Belgian draft team, the 1898 stone and brick corn granary, the 12-acre dedicated grain plot designated Plot Number 3 on the Cherry Hill Farmstead Survey, the 4 heritage variety seed stocks, and the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger bound in dark brown leather and containing 60 unbroken years of pencil-entered planting, husking, and seed selection records. The 1898 corn granary itself, a small 14 by 20-foot stone and brick outbuilding constructed by Henry Stoltzfus in the spring of 1898 specifically for the seed corn drying and storage operation, stood 38 feet northeast of the white clapboard farmhouse at the edge of the small kitchen garden plot and contained along its south and east walls a series of hand-built oak slat-shelf seed drying racks rising in 5 tiers, a hand-built wooden earcorn crib with vertical slat ventilation, the 12 hand-built cedar storage chests for shelled seed corn, a hand-built oak hand-cranked seed shelling stand fitted with a cast-iron toothed shelling wheel, a row of 12 hand-stitched canvas seed bags hanging from hand-forged iron hooks along the north wall, and the leather-bound seed-saving ledger kept since the autumn of 1898 on a small writing shelf beside the dark green wooden door. The 4 heritage varieties under inventory were the Lancaster Sure-Crop, a Pennsylvania heritage open-pollinated Yellow Dent variety, dating to the 1850s and originally bred by Lancaster County German Mennonite farmers for the limestone soils of the southern Lancaster Valley, with characteristic deep golden yellow kernels of a distinctive dent, a 102-day maturity, an average 6.4-foot stalk, 9-inch ear, and 14 rows per ear. The Bloody Butcher, a heritage variety dating to the 1840s, Virginia uplands and carried northward into Pennsylvania, with distinctive bicolored kernels of deep mahogany red and pure ivory white in irregular streaked patterns on the same cob, a 108-day maturity, an average 7.2-foot stalk, 11-inch ear, and 8 to 12 rows per ear. The Yellow Hickory King, a Pennsylvania heritage variety dating to the 1880s with characteristic, very large yellow flat kernels of the largest single kernel size of any 19th century open-pollinated American corn, a 112-day maturity, 8.4-foot stalk, 10-inch ear, and 8 to 10 rows per ear. And the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent, a Cherry Hill family selection developed by Henry Stoltzfus between 1898 and 1932 through continuous mass selection of the largest, highest-yielding ears from the original Lancaster Sure-Crop Foundation stock, with characteristic, deeply dented uniform golden yellow kernels, a 98-day maturity adapted for the shorter Lancaster County growing window, an average 6.0-foot stalk, 9-inch ear, and 16 rows per ear. The 12-acre dedicated grain plot designated plot number 3 on the Cherry Hill Farmstead Survey lay on the level lowland between the lower pasture and the Cherry Hill Creek, and had been continuously worked since the spring of 1898 in an unbroken 4-year crop rotation of corn, oats, wheat, and clover and hay, with the corn course of the rotation occupying 3 acres per year, and each of the 4 heritage varieties planted in dedicated quarter-acre to 1-acre subplots spaced at sufficient isolation distance along the length of the plot to minimize cross-pollination between varieties during the natural breeding cycle. The plot was hand-plowed each spring with the Belgian draft team of 3 workhorses inherited along with the farmstead in the autumn 1958 transfer, the same Belgian draft team that the chronicler has previously recorded in connection with the 1973 fuel crisis traction account on the Yoder farmstead 2.5 miles to the southwest, using a hand-guided walking moldboard plow drawn behind the Belgian team in long parallel furrows running east to west along the level lowland between the lower pasture and the Cherry Hill Creek. Following the spring plowing, the plot was hand-harrowed twice with a hand-built spike-tooth harrow drawn behind the Belgian team and was hand-planted in 36-inch rows with a hand-built 2-bottom walking planter equipped with 2 cast-iron seed boxes, calibrated for the heritage variety kernel size, with planting dates recorded in the seed-saving ledger, and timed for the first week of May for the longer maturity Bloody Butcher and Yellow Hickory King, and the second week of May for the shorter maturity Lancaster Sure-Crop and Stoltzfus Yellow Dent. The standing corn was hand-cultivated 3 times per growing season with a hand-built single-row walking cultivator drawn behind a single Belgian horse, with the first cultivation passing the early spring weeds before the corn reached 6 inches in height, the second cultivation passing the deeper-rooted summer weeds before the corn reached 18 inches, and the third cultivation passing the late summer weeds before the corn reached 36 inches and beginning to canopy the row middles. During the natural breeding cycle, in the 3rd week of July through the 1st week of August, Rebecca Stoltzfus carried out the hand detasseling of the inferior pollen-bearing tassels in each of the 4 variety subplots, in order to preserve the open-pollinated genetic integrity of the heritage stock and to encourage the cross-pollination of the strongest pollen-bearing tassels with the receiving silks, a labor-intensive operation that the new Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrids had been specifically engineered to eliminate, but which Rebecca had been taught from her first season on the Cherry Hill farmstead to consider the most important single step in the maintenance of the heritage variety quality. The standing corn was hand-husked beginning in the 2nd week of October, and the husked ears were hand-shocked in standing field stooks of approximately 12 ears per shock, arranged in long parallel rows down the length of the plot to permit the husked ears to dry in the autumn field air for a period of 3 weeks before being hand-loaded onto the Belgian-drawn corn wagon and carried the 400 yards from the field to the 1898 corn granary for the autumn intake operation. At the granary, the husked and field-dried ears were inspected one by Rebecca according to the kernel uniformity, ear length, road count, and disease-free criteria recorded in the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger, with the highest quality ears selected for the seed corn reserve and laid out on the 5-tier oak slat shelf drying racks along the south and east walls for a final 6-week drying period before the kernel was hand-shelled on the cast-iron tooth shelling wheel and the shelled seed corn transferred to the 12 hand-built cedar storage chests for the winter. Word of the Cherry Hill Heritage operation reached the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative at Strasburg by the spring of 1960, as the cooperative's purchasing manager, Curtis Diener, and the production manager, Bertram Faber, compiled the annual District 6 survey of non-contracted Lancaster County corn operations for the cooperative's 1960 procurement planning ledger and recorded the Cherry Hill farmstead on the survey under the heading of Small Open-Pollinated Heritage Holdouts. Word reached the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company at 217 West Vine Street, Lancaster City, by the autumn of 1962, after the Pioneer Hybrid International Seed Corporation introduced its Pioneer Hybrid 3306A Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid line to the eastern Pennsylvania commercial corn market in the spring of that year, and the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company's second-generation proprietor, Quentin Driver, began compiling district-by-district lists of potential heritage to hybrid conversion accounts across southern Lancaster County. On the morning of April 14, 1963, the cooperative's general manager, Earl Albrecht, and the purchasing manager, Curtis Diener, drove the 9 miles from the Strasburg facility at 418 South Decatur Street to Cherry Hill Lane in the cooperative's pale green 1962 Chevrolet panel truck to offer Daniel and Rebecca Stoltzfus a bulk grain procurement contract for the Cherry Hill 12-acre plot conditional upon the conversion of the plot from open-pollinated heritage corn to the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A commercial F1 hybrid using the Texas male sterile cytoplasm. The contract offer that Albrecht and Diener presented at the kitchen table on the morning of April 14, 1963, specified that the Pioneer-supplied hybrid seed corn would be provided to the Cherry Hill operation at no upfront cost, that the cooperative would guarantee buyback of the harvested 1963 commercial corn crop at the prevailing 1963 commercial corn price of $1.18 per bushel, and that a yield bonus structure would be applied for production above 78 bushels per acre, with the offer projected to yield the Cherry Hill operation an aggregate of approximately $1,400 in additional gross revenue over the previous year's open-pollinated yield. Daniel and Rebecca Stoltzfus declined the contract offer at the kitchen table on the morning of April 14, 1963, with Daniel explaining in the reported plain manner of the District 6 leadership that the family had continued the open-pollinated heritage corn-saving operation without interruption since the autumn of 1898 and intended to continue without modification for the foreseeable future. Earl Albrecht and Curtis Diener returned to the Strasburg facility on the afternoon of April 14, 1963, and recorded the visit in the cooperative's Southern Lancaster County contact log under the entry of the same date with the dry notation that the chronicler has been able to verify by reference to a 1973 reorganization period transcription of the cooperative's earlier contact records. Heritage open-pollinated operator outside the modern hybrid corn yield envelope. No further contact recommended for the 1963 procurement season. the 4 executives of the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative, who would over the course of the 1963 to 1969 period concern themselves with the Cherry Hill Heritage operation, were the general manager, Earl Albrecht, the production manager, Bertram Faber, the purchasing manager, Curtis Diener, and the quality control agronomist, Dr. Ezra Goering, each of whom carried into the matter the institutional perspective of the consolidated post-war commercial hybrid corn economy. Earl Albrecht, 62 years of age in the spring of 1963, was the second-generation operator of the cooperative and a 31-year veteran of the Southern Lancaster commercial grain trade, having joined the cooperative in 1947 as procurement assistant under his father, Frederick Albrecht, and risen to the general managership in 1958. In the cooperative's 1962 annual report, Albrecht had personally written that the conversion of the remaining heritage holdouts of District 6 and District 8 constituted the cooperative's single most important strategic priority for the 1963 through 1965 planning period. Bertram Faber, 56 years of age, was the cooperative's production manager and had since 1953 supervised the bulk storage and uniform grade marketing operations of the Strasburg facility, with particular attention to the homogeneity of the commercial corn intake stream and to the elimination of off-grade heritage variety inclusions that would dilute the cooperative's uniform grade certification status under the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's commercial grain grading standards. Curtis Diener, 53 years of age, was the cooperative's purchasing manager and the principal field representative responsible for the on-farm conversion negotiations with the non-contracted heritage holdouts of the southern Lancaster Valley, having since 1956 personally visited each of the approximately 28 non-contracted Lancaster County corn operations at least once per growing season, and successfully concluded conversion contracts with 21 of the 28 by the close of the 1962 procurement season. Dr. Ezra Goering, 48 years of age, was the cooperative's quality control agronomist and a 1949 graduate of the Penn State Department of Agronomy, having since 1958 maintained the cooperative's pioneer Hybrid 3306A trial plots at the Strasburg facility, and authored the cooperative's annual variety trial reports that uniformly recommended the continued reliance on the Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid line as the most reliable commercial corn production approach for the Lancaster County limestone soils. Quentin Driver of the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company at 217 West Vine Street, Lancaster City, 51 years of age in the spring of 1964, was a second-generation English commercial seed corn dealer and the principal pioneer hybrid international seed agent for the Eastern Pennsylvania Commercial Corn Corridor, having taken over the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company from his father Maximilian Driver in 1957 and substantially expanded the company's heritage to hybrid conversion sales effort across the southern Lancaster Valley during the 1958 through 1964 period. Dr. Vernon D. Twyler of the Pennsylvania State University Cooperative Extension Service, 54 years of age, was a 1946 graduate of the Penn State Department of Plant Breeding and the Lancaster County District Plant Breeding Specialist responsible for the dissemination of the Penn State Cooperative Extension Service's modern hybrid corn production guidelines to the Lancaster County farming community, with particular attention during the 1968 to 1970 period to the conversion of the remaining open-pollinated heritage holdouts of District 6 and District 8 to the new Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid lines. On the morning of April 14, 1963, as the chronicler has previously recorded, Earl Albrecht and Curtis Diener presented the bulk grain procurement contract offer at the kitchen table of the Cherry Hill farmhouse and were declined by Daniel and Rebecca Stoltzfus, with the dismissal recorded in the cooperative's Southern Lancaster County contact log in the dry institutional manner of the consolidated commercial hybrid corn economy. Heritage open-pollinated operator outside the modern hybrid corn yield envelope. In March of 1964, Quentin Driver of the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company at 217 West Vine Street, Lancaster City, mailed Rebecca Stoltzfus a detailed sales brochure of 16 printed pages, bound in a pale yellow paper cover, bearing the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company corporate seal and offering the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid corn at a special heritage variety conversion discount of $14 per 50-pound bag against the standard retail price of $22 per bag, and citing measurable yield advantages over the established open-pollinated heritage varieties of 38 to 47 bushels per acre under the southern Lancaster Valley limestone soil growing conditions. The Driver brochure included 3 pages of variety trial yield charts compiled from the Penn State Department of Agronomy 1960 through 1963 commercial hybrid corn variety trials at the Rock Springs Agricultural Experiment Station, 2 pages of testimonials from converted southern Lancaster Valley farms with reported yield gains, and a 1-page tear-off conversion order coupon offering delivery of the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A seed corn to the Cherry Hill farmstead at no additional shipping charge for orders received by April 1, 1964. Rebecca Stoltzfus did not respond to the March 1964 Driver brochure and did not return the conversion order coupon. And Quentin Driver subsequently described the Cherry Hill operation in the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company's 1965 quarterly sales report compiled for the company's annual stockholders meeting at the West Vine Street office as a small heritage holdout outside the regional commercial corn economy, of minimal procurement significance to the company's continued expansion across southern Lancaster County. On the afternoon of August 14, 1969, 6 months after Daniel Stoltzfus's death on February 21st of that year, the Pennsylvania State University Cooperative Extension plant breeding specialist, Dr. Vernon Detweiler, drove the 43 miles from the Penn State Cooperative Extension Lancaster County office at 1383 Arcadia Road, Lancaster City, to the Cherry Hill Farmstead Gate on Cherry Hill Lane, and presented Rebecca Stoltzfus with a Penn State Cooperative Extension Service brochure of 28 printed pages titled Modern Hybrid Corn Production, the Pioneer Hybrid Yield Advantage, arguing that the open-pollinated heritage varieties were an economically untenable 19th century relic compared to the 38 to 47 bushel per acre yield advantage of the new Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrids. Rebecca Stoltzfus, then 34 years of age and 6 months into her widowhood, listened to Dr. Detweiler's presentation at the front gate of the Cherry Hill farmhouse for approximately 20 minutes, and then declined the brochure's recommendation with the plain explanation that the family had continued the open-pollinated heritage corn-saving operation without interruption since the autumn of 1898 and intended to continue without modification. Dr. Vernon Detwiler returned to the Penn State Cooperative Extension Lancaster County office on the evening of August 14, 1969, and recorded the visit in the Lancaster County Cooperative Extension Service Annual Report, compiled at the close of the 1969 reporting year under the line item Heritage Grain, Farmstead, non-compliant with modern hybrid corn production guidelines, no further extension contact recommended for the 1969 reporting year. The same dry institutional dismissal that the Strasburg Cooperative had recorded 6 years earlier on the afternoon of April 14, 1963. The chronicler pauses here to note that the documentary record for the Cherry Hill Heritage Corn account rests on 3 principal surviving sources of unusual completeness for the period. The first is the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger, bound in dark brown leather and containing 74 unbroken years of pencil-entered planting, husking, kernel selection, and seed storage records from the autumn of 1898 through the autumn of 1972, presently held in the household archive of the Cherry Hill farmstead and consulted by the chronicler with the permission of the Stoltzfus family through the kind offices of District 6, Deacon Christian Byler. The second is the United States Department of Agriculture Agricultural Research Service National Plant Germplasm System, Moyes Collection Accession File at the Plant Introduction Station at Ames, Iowa, containing the October 1970 sealed sample acquisition records and the November 1970 entry documentation for the 4 Cherry Hill Heritage varieties under the accession numbers PI 410306 through PI 410309. The third is the Heritage Seed Conservation Federation, North American Heritage Seed Registry, at 217 North College Avenue, Bloomington, Indiana, containing the February 25, 1972, registration certificate for the 4 Cherry Hill Heritage varieties and the subsequent annual seed multiplication records from the autumn 1972 crop year forward. If you have ever raised an animal everybody told you was the wrong one for your county, leave that note for the comment thread at the close of this account. The chronicler will return to it. The Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger, on its pages corresponding to the autumn 1958 through autumn 1969 period of Daniel and Rebecca's stewardship of the Cherry Hill Heritage operation, records in unbroken pencil entries, the planting dates, hand detasseling logs, husking yields, kernel selection criteria, bushel counts per variety, and seed-saving accounts that constitute the most complete surviving documentary record of an old-order Amish open-pollinated heritage corn operation in southern Lancaster County during the period of the regional commercial hybrid consolidation. For the spring 1958 planting season, the ledger records that the Bloody Butcher and Yellow Hickory King subplots were planted on May 4, 1958, that the Lancaster Sure-Crop subplot was planted on May 12, 1958, and that the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent subplot was planted on May 14, 1958, with the planted seed corn weight noted at 12 pounds for the Bloody Butcher quarter acre, 14 pounds for the Yellow Hickory King quarter acre, 16 pounds for the Lancaster Sure-Crop 1 acre, and 24 pounds for the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent 1 1/2 acre. For the natural breeding cycle of the 3rd week of July through the 1st week of August in each year, from 1958 through 1969, the ledger records the daily hand-detasseling pass made by Rebecca Stoltzfus through each of the 4 varieties subplots, with the inferior pollen-bearing tassels removed 1 row at a time and counted in the daily log under the running tassel removal tally for each variety. For the autumn husking season of 1958, the ledger records the husking yield at 62 bushels per acre across the 4 heritage varieties combined, with the Lancaster Sure-Crop yielding 68 bushels per acre, the Bloody Butcher yielding 54 bushels per acre, the Yellow Hickory King yielding 58 bushels per acre, and the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent yielding 72 bushels per acre, the highest of the 4 varieties owing to its 98-day maturity adaptation to the shorter Lancaster County growing window. For the autumn husking seasons of 1959 through 1968, the ledger records average annual yields ranging between 62 and 66 bushels per acre across the 4 variety average, with the year-to-year variation attributed in Rebecca's pencil notation principally to the variation in the summer rainfall total at the Cherry Hill Creek Bottom plot. For the kernel selection criteria, the ledger maintains the original Henry Stoltzfus 1898 standards of ear length above the variety average, road count above the variety average, kernel uniformity through the full length of the ear, absence of any visible kernel discoloration or fungal mark, and absence of any visible insect damage mark, with the highest quality ears of each variety, set aside for the seed corn reserve and the remainder of the harvest retained for the household and livestock feed corn supply. On the morning of February 21st, 1969, Daniel Stoltzfus, then 36 years of age, died at the Cherry Hill farmhouse following a brief illness of the previous 14 days, leaving Rebecca, then 33 years of age, in sole stewardship of the Cherry Hill farmstead, the 12-acre grain plot, the 1898 corn granary, the 4 heritage variety seed stocks, and the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger. The funeral service was held in the front room of the Cherry Hill farmhouse on the afternoon of February the 23rd, 1969, attended by the District 6 community and conducted by Bishop Daniel Lapp and Deacon Christian Baylor, with Daniel Stoltzfus interred in the District 6 burial ground at Mill Creek the same afternoon, and Rebecca Stoltzfus returned to the Cherry Hill farmstead the following morning and resumed the spring 1969 planting preparation in the customary manner of the District 6 widow households. By the spring planting season of 1962, the 4-year crop rotation on plot number 3 of the Cherry Hill Farmstead Survey had settled into its steady course under Daniel and Rebecca's stewardship, with the corn course occupying 3 acres per year subdivided into the 4 heritage variety subplots, the oats course occupying 3 acres per year following the corn, the wheat and clover course occupying 3 acres per year following the oats, and the hay course occupying 3 acres per year following the wheat and clover, before returning to the corn course in the 5th year. By the spring planting season of 1965, Rebecca Stoltzfus had refined the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent selection criteria with 2 additional mass selection rounds applied to the autumn 1964 and autumn 1965 harvests, both rounds aimed at the further uniformity of the kernel row count above the established 16-row variety average and at the further shortening of the silking to maturity interval. below the established 98-day variety average, with the result that by the close of the autumn 1965 husking season, the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent kernel uniformity standard had been advanced by an estimated 8% above the autumn 1962 baseline. By the close of the autumn 1968 husking season, the 1898 corn granary held the largest seed corn reserve of any of the 4 established Pennsylvania heritage varieties in southern Lancaster County, with the cedar storage chest containing 24 bushels of Lancaster Sure-Crop saved seed, 14 bushels of Bloody Butcher saved seed, 18 bushels of Yellow Hickory King saved seed, and 22 bushels of Stoltzfus Yellow Dent saved seed, a total of 78 bushels of saved heritage open-pollinated seed corn, drawn from the cumulative selections of the autumn 1958 through autumn 1968 harvest cycle. The 78-bushel reserve at the close of the 1968 husking season, represented by Rebecca Stoltzfus's careful calculation entered in the Henry Stoltzfus seed-saving ledger on November 4, 1968. Sufficient saved seed corn to plant the entire 12-acre plot number 3 at the standard 36-inch row spacing and 6-inch in-row spacing for approximately 6 full growing seasons without further selection, a degree of seed corn redundancy substantially in excess of the customary 2 to 3 year reserve maintained by the other District 6 heritage corn operators of the period. The redundancy reserve had been deliberately built up by Daniel and Rebecca over the 1958 to 1968 period under the standing guidance of the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 Seed-Saving Ledger's prefatory entry of November 14, 1898, in which Henry Stoltzfus had recorded the family principle that a seed-saving operation worth the candle should hold not less than a 5-year seed corn reserve against the contingency of a single bad year, with the further note that the open-pollinated heritage varieties had, through their genetic diversity, proven sufficiently disease-resistant under the southern Lancaster Valley limestone soil growing conditions to render such a reserve practically maintainable. The granary intake operation of the autumn 1968 husking season was concluded on November 4, 1968, with the final 18-bushel batch of the autumn 1968 Stoltzfus Yellow Dent harvest, passing through the cast-iron-toothed shelling wheel into the 12th cedar storage chest of the granary east wall, the last full intake operation that Daniel Stoltzfus would supervise before his February 21, 1969 death. In the spring of 1970, in the commercial cornfields of southern Florida and central Mississippi, the regional plant pathology investigators of the United States Department of Agriculture Agricultural Research Service first identified an unprecedented epidemic of Southern Corn Leaf Blight caused by the fungal pathogen Bipolaris matus race T, previously known to the regional plant pathology literature as Helminthosporium matus, that proved specifically virulent against the Texas male sterile cytoplasm that had been introduced into commercial American hybrid corn breeding in 1962, and that by 1969 had been incorporated into approximately 85% of all commercial United States hybrid corn acreage, including the dominant Pioneer Hybrid 3306A line. The epidemic was first identified in commercial Florida and Mississippi cornfields on the second week of May, 1970, with the initial USDAARS regional alert mailed to the Southern State Cooperative Extension Services on May 21, 1970, and the initial Federal Plant Pathology Assessment Report, compiled at the USDAARS Beltsville, Maryland Laboratories on May 28, 1970, under Dr. Howard Mendelson. By the second week of June 1970, the Southern Corn Leaf Blight pathogen had advanced northward through the commercial cornfields of central Tennessee and western Kentucky. With the regional plant pathology investigators of the University of Tennessee Agricultural Experiment Station at Knoxville and the University of Kentucky Agricultural Experiment Station at Lexington jointly issuing a Mississippi-Ohio Valley regional warning on June 18, 1970, to all commercial hybrid corn operations of the Tennessee and Kentucky River Valley regions. By the third week of July 1970, the pathogen had advanced further northward into southern Ohio and southern Indiana, with the Ohio Agricultural Research and Development Center at Worcester and the Purdue University Department of Botany and Plant Pathology jointly compiling a Lower Ohio Valley Plant Pathology Assessment Report on July 24, 1970, estimating that an aggregate 22% of the expected 1970 commercial hybrid corn yield of the southern Ohio and southern Indiana corridor had, at that date, already been compromised by Southern Corn Leaf Blight infection of the standing Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid acreage. By the second week of August 1970, the pathogen had been identified in eastern Pennsylvania commercial cornfields, with the initial confirmed Lancaster County Pioneer Hybrid 3306A infections reported to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's Bureau of Plant Industry on August 11, 1970, from 3 of the Strasburg Cooperative's contracted hybrid farms north of the Strasburg Pike, and with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's Bureau of Plant Industry. Plant pathology investigator Dr. Lovell Geist, 49 years of age and a 1948 graduate of Cornell University College of Agriculture, issuing a regional warning to all 84 hybrid corn contracted farms of the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative on August 18, 1970. The Geist Regional Warning of August 18, 1970, mailed in a standard PA Bureau of Plant Industry envelope from the Bureau's Lancaster County Field Office at 1383 Arcadia Road, Lancaster City, advised all 84 contracted hybrid farms of the documented presence of Bipolaris Matus Race T in 3 confirmed Lancaster County Pioneer Hybrid 3306A fields, of the documented specific virulence of the pathogen against the Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid lines, and of the expected substantial yield loss exposure of the contracted hybrid acreage during the remaining August and September standing corn period. By the final October 1970 harvest count, compiled by the Strasburg Cooperative's quality control agronomist, Dr. Ezra Goring, and submitted to the Cooperative's October 28, 1970 board meeting, under the heading 1970 Commercial Corn Yield Review, the 84 hybrid corn contracted farms of the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative had lost an aggregate 38% of their expected 1970 corn yield, with the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A acreage suffering the highest losses at an average 47% yield reduction across the 71 contracted farms growing the Pioneer Hybrid 3306A line as their primary commercial corn variety. The October 1970 final harvest count of the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative, compiled across the 84 hybrid corn contracted farms of the southern Lancaster Valley and submitted to the Cooperative's board on October 28, 1970, recorded an aggregate 38% loss of the expected 1970 corn yield against the 8-year rolling average baseline of 78 bushels per acre across the Pioneer hybrid 3306A acreage, with the actual 1970 average yield coming in at approximately 42 bushels per acre across the 71 Pioneer hybrid 3306 A primary farms and 51 bushels per acre across the 13 mixed variety hybrid farms. 3 of the larger Lancaster County commercial hybrid farms, the Eberly Farm at 412 Vintage Road in Paradise Township, the Fisher Farm at 218 Penn Grant Road in Strasburg Township, and the Hostetler Farm at 1404 May Post Office Road in Bart Township, each of which had between 1964 and 1968 converted entirely from its previous mixed open-pollinated and hybrid operation to a single-line Pioneer hybrid 3306A operation under the standard cooperative bulk procurement contract. Each lost more than $14,000 in expected 1970 grossed corn revenue against the prevailing 1970 commercial corn price of $1.32 per bushel. The Strasburg Cooperative's autumn 1970 grain receipts totaled across the 84 contracted farms and submitted to the Cooperative's board on November 18, 1970, by the production manager Bertram Faber, under the heading 1970 Procurement Season Summary, came in at approximately 41% below the 1969 baseline of 368,000 bushels of bulk procured commercial corn, the largest single-year decline in the Cooperative's 23-year operational history. At the Cooperative's Emergency Board meeting of November 18, 1970, the General Manager, Earl Albrecht, presented to the 7-member board a preliminary 1971 procurement planning memorandum recommending the partial diversification of the Cooperative's 1971 contracted variety portfolio away from the exclusive reliance on the Pioneer Hybrid 3306, a Texas male sterile cytoplasm hybrid line, and toward a partial reintroduction of the previously displaced open-pollinated heritage varieties, a recommendation that constituted, by the chronicler's reading of the November 1970 board minutes, the first institutional acknowledgment by the Strasburg Cooperative of the strategic value of the genetically diverse open-pollinated heritage stock that the cooperative had spent the previous 23 years systematically displacing from the contracted commercial corn acreage of southern Lancaster County. The November 1970 board minutes further record that at the close of the November 18th emergency board meeting, Earl Albrecht had been authorized by unanimous board vote to make an exploratory contact with the principal remaining open-pollinated heritage seed corn operators of District 6 and District 8 for the purpose of negotiating an emergency 1971 heritage variety seed procurement contract on terms substantially more favorable to the heritage operators than the 1963 through 1969 conversion contracts that the cooperative had previously offered. The Strasburg Cooperative's contact log entry of November 19, 1970, records the planned September 4th, 1970 visit by Earl Albrecht to the Cherry Hill farmstead. The visit that had in fact been completed on the morning of September 4th, 1976 weeks earlier, together with a memorandum from Earl Albrecht to the board recommending the further pursuit of the Cherry Hill Heritage seed procurement opportunity on revised terms substantially more favorable to Rebecca Stoltzfus than the earlier April 1963 conversion contract offer. Meanwhile, 3 miles east of Bird in Hand, on the 12-acre plot number 3 of the Cherry Hill Farmstead Survey, the autumn 1970 husking season had been concluded by Rebecca Stoltzfus in the customary manner of the previous 12 growing seasons, with the 4-variety subplot mix of Lancaster Sure-Crop, Bloody Butcher, Yellow Hickory King, and Stoltzfus Yellow Dent, yielding an aggregate 64 bushels per acre across the 3-acre corn course of the rotation, a yield ratio identical to the 4-variety average of the previous 12 years and substantially above the 42 bushels per acre average of the 71 Pioneer Hybrid 3306A primary farms of the surrounding commercial hybrid corn corridor of southern Lancaster County. The Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger entry for the autumn 1970 husking season records that the 4-variety subplot inspections were carried out by Rebecca Stoltzfus between October 8, 1970 and October 18, 1970, and that no measurable Southern Corn Leaf Blight infection was identified across the standing corn or the husked and shocked ears of any of the 4 heritage variety subplots, a finding consistent with the genetic diversity of the open-pollinated heritage stock, the absence of the Texas male sterile cytoplasm from any of the 4 variety lines, and the maintenance of the natural pollen-bearing tassel by Rebecca's hand, detasseling of only the inferior tassels during the natural breeding cycle. On the morning of September 4, 1970, 6 weeks before the final October 1970 harvest count would be compiled by the Strasburg Cooperative's quality control agronomist, Earl Albrecht, drove the 9 miles from the Strasburg facility to Cherry Hill Lane in the cooperative's pale green 1962 Chevrolet panel truck and presented Rebecca Stoltzfus at the front gate of the Cherry Hill farmhouse with a revised heritage variety seed corn procurement offer at $4.20 per pound of saved seed corn, against the original April 1963 commercial hybrid offer of $1.18 per bushel, a procurement rate multiple of more than 260 times the earlier offer when measured by saved seed weight. Rebecca Stoltzfus declined the seed sale offer at the front gate of the Cherry Hill farmhouse on the morning of September 4, 1970, and counter-offered a one-time allotment of 84 pounds of Lancaster Sure-Crop saved seed at the price of $8.40 per pound, twice the cooperative's offered price, contingent upon 2 conditions: that the seed be distributed to the affected Lancaster County hybrid farms at no profit markup, and that the seed be identified to the receiving farms as 1898 Cherry Hill Lancaster County heritage open-pollinated stock. Earl Albrecht declined both conditions and returned to the Strasburg facility on the afternoon of September 4, 1970. On the morning of October 14, 1970, USDA-ARS plant pathology investigator Dr. Howard Mendelson, then 47 years of age and a 1948 graduate of the University of Wisconsin College of Agriculture, and a USDA-ARS plant pathology investigator, since 1962, assigned to the regional Southern Corn Leaf Blight epidemic response team coordinated out of the USDA-ARS Beltsville, Maryland laboratories, drove the 138 miles from Beltsville, Maryland to Cherry Hill Lane in a USDA-ARS panel truck to collect sealed genetic samples of the 4 Cherry Hill Heritage open-pollinated corn varieties for the USDA-ARS National Plant Germplasm System Genetic Reservoir Collection. Dr. Mendelsohn spent 2 full days at the Cherry Hill 1898 corn granary, the 4 variety field plot subplots, and the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger archive, and on the afternoon of October 16, 1970, he returned to Beltsville, Maryland, with sealed seed samples of each of the 4 varieties. The sealed samples entered the USDA-ARS National Plant Germplasm System Maize Collection at the Plant Introduction Station at Ames, Iowa, on November 9, 1970, under the accession numbers PI4 10306, PI4 10307, PI4 10308, and PI4 10309, corresponding respectively to the Lancaster Sure-Crop, Bloody Butcher, Yellow Hickory King, and Stoltzfus Yellow Dent varieties of the Cherry Hill Heritage seed stock. On the afternoon of November 14, 1970, Dr. Vernon Detweiler, the same Penn State Cooperative Extension plant breeding specialist who had visited the Cherry Hill Gate 15 months earlier on August 14, 1969, with the modern hybrid corn production brochure recommending the abandonment of the heritage varieties, returned to Cherry Hill Lane with a Penn State Department of Plant Breeding seed procurement contract offer proposing Penn State acquisition of 240 pounds of saved Lancaster Sure-Crop and 180 pounds of saved Stoltzfus Yellow Dent for inclusion in a new emergency non-Texas male sterile hybrid breeding program at the Penn State Agricultural Experiment Station at Rock Springs. Rebecca declined the contract and counteroffered a one-time donation of 24 pounds of each of the 4 heritage varieties to the Penn State Emergency Breeding Program with no commercial license attached and with the explicit condition that no commercial F1 hybrid derivative carrying the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent identifier ever be brought to commercial seed corn market. Penn State accepted both conditions on November 18, 1970. On the morning of February 22, 1972, 16 months after the conclusion of the 1970 Southern Corn Leaf Blight harvest reckoning, Theodora Halverson, then 43 years of age and a 1952 graduate of Carleton College and the founding director of the Heritage Seed Conservation Federation, drove the 624 miles from the Federation headquarters at 217 North College Avenue, Bloomington, Indiana, to the Cherry Hill Farmstead on Cherry Hill Lane in the Federation's pale blue 1969 Ford station wagon, arriving on the late afternoon of February 22, 1972, and lodging that evening with the District 6 minister Aaron Stoltzfus and his wife Hannah at the parsonage 1.5 miles to the south of the Cherry Hill farmstead. The Heritage Seed Conservation Federation had itself been founded in the spring of 1971 in direct response to the 1970 Southern Corn Leaf Blight epidemic and to the related scholarly recognition by the United States agricultural genetics community of the strategic value of the surviving open-pollinated heritage seed stock collections, held by the plain farming communities of the eastern United States and the Mennonite and Hutterite farming communities of the upper Midwestern United States, a recognition that the Federation's founding charter explicitly attributed to the genetic diversity reckoning of the 1970 SCLB epidemic On the morning of February 23, 1972, Halverson arrived at the Cherry Hill farmstead and was received by Rebecca Stoltzfus, who showed her the 1898 corn granary, the 12 cedar storage chests, the 5-tier oak slat shelf drying racks, the cast iron toothed seed shelling wheel, the 12 hand-stitched canvas seed bags hanging from hand-forged iron hooks along the north wall, and the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger, then containing 74 unbroken years of pencil-entered records. On the afternoon of February 23, 1972, Theodora Halverson entered the 4 Cherry Hill heritage varieties into the Federation's North American Heritage Seed Registry as accessions HSCF-NA-1972-004 through HSCF-NA-1972-007, corresponding respectively to the Lancaster Sure-Crop, the Bloody Butcher, the Yellow Hickory King, and the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent. And on the afternoon of February 25, 1972, the registration certificate was signed by Theodora Halverson on behalf of the Federation and by Rebecca Stoltzfus on behalf of the Cherry Hill Heritage Seed Stock, and was witnessed by Deacon Christian Byler of District 6. The Federation subsequently contracted Rebecca Stoltzfus for an ongoing seed multiplication arrangement, under the terms of which Rebecca would provide 12 pounds of each of the 4 heritage varieties per year for the Federation's Heritage Seed Bank distribution program at a procurement rate of $2.40 per pound, for a total annual seed multiplication payment of $115.20. The arrangement to commence with the autumn 1972 crop year and to renew annually subject to the continued maintenance of the 4 varieties seed stock at the Cherry Hill 1898 corn granary. On Sunday, November 26, 1972, the recurring Plain Harvest Channel food and agriculture writer Mariela Castellano of the Philadelphia Inquirer published in the Inquirer's Sunday feature section a 4,800-word feature titled The 1898 Corn Granary that outlasted the 1970 blight, accompanied by 3 black and white photographs of the Cherry Hill 1898 corn granary, the 5-tier oak slat shelf drying racks, and Rebecca Stoltzfus standing at the dark green wooden door of the granary holding a single ear of Lancaster Sure-Crop saved seed corn. The feature subsequently reproduced in the Federation's autumn 1972 newsletter and excerpted in the March 1973 New York Times Magazine column by the recurring Channel food editor Cornelia Vanderveer on December 11, 1970, 3 weeks after the November 18, 1970, Penn State acceptance of Rebecca Stoltzfus's 2-condition donation. Quentin Driver of the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company wrote Rebecca a typed letter on the company's standard West Vine Street letterhead, inquiring whether the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company might enter into a seed source partnership arrangement for an emerging Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company heritage line product to be marketed across the eastern Pennsylvania commercial corn corridor. Rebecca declined the inquiry in a brief handwritten reply postmarked December 18, 1970, and the inquiry was not pursued further by the Lancaster Hybrid Seed Company under Driver's proprietorship. On December 18, 1970, Dr. Vernon Detweiler of the Pennsylvania State University Cooperative Extension Service formally retracted the August 14, 1969 non-compliance notation entered against the Cherry Hill Heritage Grain Farmstead in the Lancaster County Cooperative Extension Service Annual Report for the 1969 reporting year, with the retraction entered in a typed letter addressed to Rebecca Stoltzfus on Penn State Cooperative Extension letterhead and acknowledging that the August 1969 recommendation against the open-pollinated heritage corn-saving operation at the Cherry Hill farmstead had been substantially overtaken by the 1970 Southern Corn Leaf Blight epidemic and the corresponding institutional reassessment of the strategic value of the surviving open-pollinated heritage variety stocks. Between the autumn of 1970 and the close of 1973, each of the 4 executives of the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative, who had between 1963 and 1969 personally directed the cooperative's heritage to hybrid conversion effort across the southern Lancaster Valley, Earl Albrecht, Bertram Faber, Curtis Diener, and Dr. Ezra Goering, visited or wrote to Cherry Hill Lane at least once. Earl Albrecht on the morning of September 4th, 1970. Curtis Diener on the morning of March 18th, 1971. Dr. Ezra Goering on the afternoon of June 22nd, 1971. And Bertram Faber by letter dated September 4th, 1972. The Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative reduced its 1972 contracted hybrid corn farms from the 1969 high water mark of 84 farms down to 56 farms, and reorganized in October of 1973 under a partial cooperative restructuring authorized by the December 1972 Board Resolution under the heading 1973 Strategic Restructuring, with the restructuring establishing a new Heritage Line Procurement Division operating in parallel to the existing Hybrid Bulk Procurement Division and dedicated to the procurement of open-pollinated heritage variety corn from a small dedicated network of District 6 and District 8 heritage operators on substantially more favorable per-bushel terms than the existing hybrid procurement schedule. Earl Albrecht, 66 years of age and a 31-year veteran of the Strasburg Cooperative, retired from the general managership of the Lancaster County Grain Marketing Cooperative on March 18, 1974, and was succeeded in the general managership by the former production manager Bertram Faber under a board appointment dated April 1, 1974. The cooperative's Heritage Line Procurement Division was thereafter directed by the former purchasing manager Curtis Diener until his own retirement in October of 1977. The chronicler notes for the documentary record that no member of the Strasburg Cooperative's pre-1970 hybrid procurement leadership ever publicly retracted the April 14, 1963 contact log notation that had described the Cherry Hill Heritage operation as outside the modern hybrid corn yield envelope, nor was such a public retraction sought by Rebecca Stoltzfus or by the District 6 leadership at any point during the subsequent 1970 through 1978 institutional realignment of the Southern Lancaster commercial corn economy. The Heritage Seed Conservation Federation's Autumn 1972 newsletter, mailed from the Federation headquarters at 217 North College Avenue, Bloomington, Indiana, on October 14, 1972, to the Federation's then 342 registered subscriber households across the United States and Canada, included a 4-page notice of the February 25, 1972, Registration of the 4 Cherry Hill Heritage open-pollinated corn varieties under accession numbers HSCF-NA-1972-004 through HSCF-NA-1972-007, together with a one-page reproduction of the registration certificate and a two-page summary of the November 26, 1972 Philadelphia Inquirer Sunday feature by Mariella Castellano. The Pennsylvania Heritage Quarterly featured the 1898 Cherry Hill Corn Granary in its spring 1973 issue, in a 6-page illustrated article compiled by the Quarterly's assistant editor, Marjorie Hallowell, and based on a 2-day visit to the Cherry Hill farmstead in late March of 1973, with 3 black and white photographs of the stone and brick granary exterior, the 5-tier oak slat-shelf drying racks, and the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger open to the November 14, 1898 prefatory entry on the family principle of the 5-year seed corn reserve. The District 6 ledger entry by Deacon Christian Byler on April 22, 1973. The standing community record kept by Christian Byler at the District 6 Meeting House at Mill Creek, and consulted by the chronicler with the permission of Bishop Daniel Lapp through the kind offices of the Mill Creek Meeting House archivist. Records that, on the afternoon of April 22, 1973, the District 6 community formally acknowledged the Cherry Hill Heritage seed stock as a community significant agricultural inheritance, and recommended that the Cherry Hill 4-variety open-pollinated seed-saving operation be supported by the District 6 community as a continuing community responsibility through the regular labor exchange of the spring planting and the autumn husking seasons. The Federation's continuing seed multiplication contract with Rebecca Stoltzfus was renewed on February 18, 1975, under the same terms as the original autumn 1972 arrangement, was renewed again on February 14, 1978, under modestly improved per-pound procurement terms of $3 per pound, and was renewed a third time on February 22, 1981, under further improved per-pound procurement terms of $3.60 per pound, with the cumulative Federation procurement payments to Rebecca Stoltzfus between the autumn 1972 crop year and the autumn 1981 crop year, totaling approximately $1,248.60 across the 10-year period. By the spring of 1978, the 4 Cherry Hill Heritage open-pollinated corn varieties had been distributed by the Federation's Heritage Seed Bank to an aggregate 186 small-scale heritage seed-saving households across the United States and Canada, with the largest single-year distribution occurring in the spring of 1976, the United States bicentennial year, when the Federation distributed Cherry Hill Heritage seed corn to 42 households as part of its bicentennial heritage seed distribution project. By the spring of 1981, the Cherry Hill Heritage seed stock had been further entered into the seed corn collection of the United States National Seed Storage Laboratory at Fort Collins, Colorado, under the long-term Sub-Zero Germplasm Preservation accession numbers NSSL-1981-CH-001 through NSSL-1981-CH-004, where the genetic material of the 4 1898 Cherry Hill Heritage corn varieties was thereafter held in indefinite secure preservation as part of the United States National Germplasm Reserve. The chronicler closes the Cherry Hill Heritage Corn account with a documentary record of the autumn 1898 founding of the 1898 corn granary, as it has been preserved on the prefatory pages of the Henry Stoltzfus 1898 seed-saving ledger, then bound in the dark brown leather of the November 14th, 1898 first binding, and presently held in the household archive of the Cherry Hill farmhouse. In the autumn of 1898, at the open, dark green wooden door of the newly completed 14 by 20-foot stone and brick corn granary, 38 feet northeast of the white clapboard farmhouse on the 80-acre rolling hillside 3 miles east of Bird in Hand, Henry Stoltzfus, then 47 years of age, the younger brother of Daniel's paternal grandfather, Stephen Stoltzfus, whose autumn 1898 planting of the Cherry Hill orchard the chronicler has previously recorded in the package 10 cider account, stood holding a single ear of golden yellow Lancaster Sure-Crop seed corn, the first ear selected from the autumn 1898 harvest for inclusion in the inaugural seed stock of the 1898 corn granary. Henry Stoltzfus, on that afternoon, wore the plain field dress of the old order Amish farmer of his generation, a full, untrimmed, dark chestnut chest-length beard streaked with gray, no mustache, weather-worn, ruddy skin from the harvest field, deep-set dark blue eyes under heavy brows, broad-shouldered sturdy build, plain white long-sleeve shirt, broad-fall black trousers held at the waist by plain black canvas suspenders, plain black leather lace-up work boots. Beside him, on a hand-built oak peel rack, rested a row of 12 further ears of the 4 heritage varieties, 3 ears of the Lancaster Sure-Crop, 3 ears of the Bloody Butcher, 3 ears of the yellow Hickory King, and 3 ears of the small first selection of the family line variety that he would over the following 34 years develop through continuous mass selection from the Lancaster Sure-Crop Foundation stock into the variety eventually identified in the Cherry Hill family seed-saving ledger as the Stoltzfus Yellow Dent. His wife, Katie Stoltzfus, 43 years of age, stood beside him at the dark green wooden door of the new granary, holding a hand-built woven basket of additional selected seed ears for the autumn 1898 inaugural stock. An old order Amish woman with dark chestnut hair center-parted and gathered into a low, neat bun beneath a white heart-shaped prayer cap. Weather-worn, pale, freckled skin, hazel brown eyes, calm, composed, unsmiling mouth, sturdy build, wearing a plain, long-sleeved, solid, deep, walnut brown dress, with a high collar over a full-coverage matching deep walnut brown apron pinned at the shoulders with straight pins, thick black wool stockings, plain black leather lace-up boots. Henry Stoltzfus had himself been taught the corn-breeding craft in the spring of 1864 at the age of 13 on the same Cherry Hill ground by his father, Jonas Stoltzfus, then 36 years of age and the elder steward of the Cherry Hill farmstead in the years following the Civil War period of southern Lancaster County's mid-19th century agricultural transition. Jonas Stoltzfus had himself learned the corn-breeding craft in the spring of 1832, at the age of 12, from his maternal grandfather, Reinhard Mueller of Schaefferstown, Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, the same Lebanon County limestone valley whose continuous German pietist agricultural tradition the chronicler has previously recorded in connection with the Utsi Brown Swiss dairy operation of Package 1, carrying the open-pollinated seed corn craft forward from the German pietist settlement period of the 1740s into the Cherry Hill farmstead inheritance of the autumn 1898 corn granary. If you have ever raised an animal everybody told you was the wrong one for your county, leave a comment below telling us what it was. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe and ring the bell. There is one of these stories in every county in America. We are working through them one harvest at a time.